I'm 103 years old, and I need to tell you something that most people never realize until it's already too late. For a long time, I believed that if something was painful enough, if something was frightening enough, if life felt heavy enough, it would eventually just go away on its own. I was wrong. I was born in 1920, at the edge of a world that was already breaking apart, and over the course of my life, I've watched that world fall into chaos more times than I can count. Wars, fear, loss, separation, moments where it truly felt like everything familiar had collapsed overnight. And yet, the most dangerous moments were never the loud ones. They were the quiet ones. The moments where I told myself, I'll deal with this later. The moments where I believed time was on my side simply because I was still breathing. At 70 years old, I honestly thought my life was finished. Not dramatically, not all at once, just internally. I remember sitting alone, thinking that everything meaningful was already behind me, that whatever came next would just be waiting to age, waiting to disappear, waiting for the days to run out quietly. And if you had asked me back then, I would have told you I was fine. That's the lie people tell themselves right before they slowly disappear. What I didn't understand yet was this: life doesn't end when everything falls apart. It ends when you stop responding to it. And before I tell you what finally changed, before I tell you why I'm still here at 103, you need to understand something important. Most people don't waste their lives because they are careless. They waste them because they believe there will always be more time. When people talk about fear today, they often imagine it as something abstract, something emotional, something that lives only in the mind. But I grew up in a time when fear had a sound, a smell, and a rhythm, because during the war years, the world didn't feel uncertain in theory. It felt unsafe every single day, and you woke up each morning not knowing what had changed while you were asleep. I was young then, but old enough to understand that something fundamental had cracked, because every day brought a new headline, a new loss, a new reminder that stability was an illusion, and people learned very quickly how to live inside tension without ever questioning what it was doing to them on the inside. What I noticed, even back then, was that most people dealt with fear the same way. They tried not to look at it. They convinced themselves that if they didn't name it, if they didn't touch it, if they didn't stare at it for too long, it might eventually fade on its own, as if silence could erase reality, as if avoidance was the same thing as strength. But it never worked. Fear doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It just moves deeper. I watched entire generations learn how to function while carrying unresolved dread, grief, and uncertainty, telling themselves they would process it later. Once things calmed down, once the war ended, once life felt normal again. The problem was that normal never really returned. It only changed its shape. Even after the war, even after the celebrations, even after the world started rebuilding, the fear didn't leave people. It simply became quieter and quieter. Fear is far more dangerous because it convinces you that you're fine while it slowly shapes every decision you make. I didn't understand this at the time, but I was already learning a pattern that would follow me for decades. When life becomes overwhelming, most people don't confront it, they postpone themselves. They wait. They wait for clarity. They wait for courage. They wait for the right moment to feel alive again. And without realizing it, they begin to confuse surviving with living. As the years passed, I became very good at telling myself comforting stories. Stories like this phase will pass, or once things settle down, I'll finally breathe, or when I reach the next stage, life will feel lighter. Those thoughts sound harmless, even reasonable, but what I didn't realize then was that they were quietly training me to delay my own life. I watched people around me do the same thing, year after year, decade after decade, always convinced they were standing just one step away from peace, one promotion away from rest, one season away from happiness, never noticing that the finish line kept moving further away. The strange part is that nothing ever felt dramatically wrong. Life worked, days passed, responsibilities were handled, and because nothing collapsed all at once, it was easy to believe that everything was fine, even when something essential was missing. That's how time slips through your hands, not through disaster, but through routine. I told myself I would focus on what mattered later. Once I had earned the right to slow down, once the important work was done, once I no longer felt needed everywhere at once. I believed postponement was maturity, that patience meant sacrifice, and that sacrifice would eventually be rewarded. But time doesn't reward patience. It only records how you used it. Looking back now, I see how dangerous that illusion was, because while I was waiting for life to open up, it was quietly closing in around me, narrowing my choices without asking for permission. The truth is, nothing was stopping me except the belief that I still had plenty of time to figure it all out. And that belief stayed with me far longer than it should have. Right up until the moment when my life was forced to change. Not gently, not gradually, but all at once. The moment everything finally broke didn't come with drama or warning signs that others could see. It came quietly inside a car on an ordinary day when my husband, after 46 years of marriage, told me he was leaving. There was no shouting, no explosion, just a sentence that erased the life I thought I was still living. I remember driving home afterward, sitting behind the wheel, unable to move, staring at the road in front of me, while something inside went completely still. Because in that instant, I didn't feel heartbroken the way people imagine heartbreak. I felt finished. I honestly believed there was nothing left to live for. We had built everything together, a family, a life, a shared identity, and suddenly all of it was gone, leaving me alone with a future I had never prepared for, at an age when most people believe reinvention is no longer an option. I was in my 70s, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't see a path forward. That's the moment most people don't talk about. The moment where you don't feel sad or angry, but empty, where even grief feels like too much effort, where the easiest thing in the world would be to close the door on life and sit down inside the wreckage. I could have done that. I could have driven home, shut the door, and slowly disappeared, telling myself that this was simply how things ended for people my age. And for a while I stayed in that space, suspended between what my life had been and what I was terrified it might become, not knowing yet that this moment, this exact fracture, was about to force a decision I could no longer postpone. What people don't realize about moments like that is that they don't demand courage right away. They demand a decision, not a big one, not an inspiring one, just a quiet, uncomfortable choice between two paths that both feel painful. I could either shut everything down and let that moment define the rest of my life, or I could keep one small door open, even if I had no idea what was on the other side of it. At the time, I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel hopeful. I didn't suddenly believe in myself. I simply knew that I didn't want to disappear. So instead of retreating completely, I chose to stay engaged, even while feeling broken, even while feeling lost, even while not knowing who I was without the life I had shared for so long. I kept working. I kept listening. I kept paying attention to the parts of me that still felt curious, still felt responsive, still reacted when something meaningful crossed my path. That was the turning point, not because everything improved overnight, but because I stopped waiting for permission to continue living. About a year later, I did something I never expected. I wrote my ex-husband a letter, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of clarity, thanking him for giving me my freedom, because for the first time in decades, I was no longer defined as part of someone else's story. I wasn't us anymore. I was myself. And that realization didn't come with excitement or relief. It came with responsibility. Because once you understand that your life is truly yours again, you can no longer pretend you don't have a choice in how you live it. After that moment, people often assume that what kept me alive was discipline or optimism or some kind of extraordinary strength. But the truth is much simpler and much harder to accept, because what sustained me had nothing to do with fighting life and everything to do with how I learned to relate to it. I discovered that life only continues to feel alive when you stay in relationship with it, when you keep responding instead of withdrawing, because the moment you stop listening, stop caring, stop engaging, time doesn't stop for you. It simply passes over you. What helped me wasn't grand ambition, but small forms of connection that I refused to abandon, like moving my body even when it felt inconvenient, allowing myself rest without calling it weakness, and staying present enough to notice when something still stirred interest or meaning inside me. I learned that love is not something you wait to feel. It's something you practice. And when you practice it, it multiplies, because love expressed outwardly has a way of circling back inward, keeping the inner world alive even as the outer one changes. Laughter became another anchor, not the kind that distracts or mocks, but the kind that softens, that reminds you that joy can exist alongside loss, that lightness does not erase depth, but actually makes it bearable. I also learned to work in a different way, not to exhaust myself proving something to the world, but to contribute where I felt genuinely useful, because purpose isn't about productivity. It's about feeling needed by life itself. And listening, real listening, became essential, because when you listen with openness instead of defense, life starts speaking back to you, offering quiet guidance that you can't hear when you're consumed by fear or regret. None of these things sound extraordinary, and that's exactly why they work, because what keeps you alive is rarely dramatic. It's the daily decision to stay connected rather than retreat. Now, at 103, I understand something that once felt impossible to see while I was living inside it. Time doesn't disappear suddenly. It thins out. It becomes quieter, faster, more selective. You don't notice it leaving until you realize that the people you once leaned on are gone, that familiar voices no longer answer, that entire chapters of your life now exist only inside your memory, and that no one can take those memories from you, but no one can add to them either. That's why I'm telling you this now, not to scare you, not to impress you, but because every day you postpone living intentionally, you are making a choice, whether you admit it or not, and those choices accumulate faster than you think. If I could speak to my younger self, not with advice, but with honesty, I wouldn't tell her to be fearless or ambitious or successful. I would tell her to stop waiting, to stop assuming that clarity will arrive before action, to stop believing that life will announce when it's time to begin, to stop treating joy as something that must be earned later. Because the truth is, the hardest moments do pass, but they only pass through people who stay open to life instead of closing themselves off from it. I don't have much left ahead of me in terms of years, and I'm at peace with that, because these later years, after everything fell apart, have been the richest of my life, not because they were easy, but because I finally showed up for them fully. So if you're listening to this and telling yourself that you'll start living differently someday, understand this clearly. Someday is not coming. Today is all you ever have. And what you do with it is already shaping the story you'll one day look back on.